I'm not logged in, but I have the application open. I will pause for a quick 30 seconds for everybody to have your AppScan Standard open up. Yeah, and again, it's just the first time you run it from this drive. They call it it's an SSD drive, but it seems like it's still somehow cached, and just the first launch is always so slow and might take a while to open it. But you can see mine started pretty quickly because I actually had it open before, and then it's already it's already it's already cached, so it opens up a lot quicker. Okay, so let's get started with AppScan Standard here. So what I'll do is let's go through a typical process of configuring a regular application. I want to focus this workshop a little bit more on the authentication aspect, because that's one thing a lot of people want to know, and just to see where AppScan and how does it support configuring your login. So when you are in this home menu, let's click on the top left box where it says the web application. Okay, and that should open up a little kind of pop-up scan configuration wizard. And we'll be going through this menu, the screen here, and configure a scan. So in the starting URL, let's all put so if you click on the drop down, okay, click on the demo testfire.net. And here's where we can actually click on the view in browser, so the little kind of globe icon towards the right of the URL field, to verify that we have good connectivity to AppScan, to the target site that you're scanning. So I always recommend doing this, because you want to make sure wherever you have AppScan Standard installed, right? Whether that is in a internal network, or if it's at on a public server like this one here, that you have the ability to connect to your target application. Okay, so just make sure you can do that, and then you should also get a green check mark here on whether you have successfully connected to the server. You have some additional options which we will not use, but you have the ability to specify additional servers and domains. If your website or your application traverses to other links or other URL that is not part of the domain here, then you need to specify that here. Otherwise, it's going to get skipped, and it's not going to be included in the scan. Okay, so let's go into login management. And for those who have used AppScan, you've seen this before. The process of recording the login is fairly straightforward, but I also want to talk about what are the different things you can configure what has been recorded as part of your login sequence. So to log into your application, or to record login to your application, very simply, you can just click on the record button. And we're going to be using the AppScan Chromium browser, the built-in one. So it should just be the first option in the dropdown. Okay, and once you click on that, it should open up another screen that takes you to the starting URL. And notice how it says it's recording, right? So basically what is happening here is that every action that I am taking is going to be recorded. By default, AppScan is using something called the action-based explorer. And what that really means is that it's capturing your user input as if it's a user who's navigating through the application. And this is important because a lot of applications nowadays are developed using heavy JavaScript frameworks, things like React or Angular, that requires the actual rendering of the site, right, by executing the JavaScript to see the components within the application. And if your crawler is just based on request and response, it's not going to be able to do that recording properly. Whereas here, we're using Action-Based Explorer, it's able to render and view your applications in its full entirety, as if a user is navigating and accessing the site. Okay, so very important distinction on the ability to crawl through your application. And the same Action-Based Explorer technology is used for not just the login sequence, but also our automated Explorer capability during the actual automated scan. So let's just now go ahead and teach AppScan how to log in. So we're going to click on the sign in button here. Okay, and then that should take you to this login form. And then here you can just put J Smith as the username, and password is going to be demo, DEMO 1234. Okay, I'm going to put it in the chat here just so that everybody's clear what the login is. So J Smith demo 1234. Okay. Again, it's J Smith, JSMITH, and demo DEMO 1234. Now just click login. It should now say, hello, John Smith, you have successfully logged in. At this time, you can expand this little view at the bottom here, and you can actually see the exact set of steps, right, that has been captured by AppScan to arrive at this page. Okay. So what we're going to do now is click on I am logged into the site. Okay, and then here, if you click on the more view here, it's going to show you the recorded login sequence. It's going to try to play back on the set of steps that we have just recorded. So you can see things like, it was able to identify, the session ID that was generated as part of this login sequence. It also has detected a sign, in-session detection pattern. Okay, so this is something I want to talk about a little bit more later on, but you can see it automatically picked off sign off as a pattern to indicate that it has logged in. Okay, let's click close. And now we see login is successfully configured. Let's all click on the little checkbox at the bottom here, where it says, I want to configure in-session detection options. Okay, and that should bring up additional menu here in the middle here for login management detail. And let's click next. And that takes us to this, additional details around what we just recorded or what was just captured, during the login sequence. So the first thing we can actually examine is, is the login playback. Okay, so what has been recorded as part of the login. And if you click on the edit, you'll see the set of steps that was kind of captured during the login sequence. The number of seconds that you want to wait, the credential. And you can actually replay it back here and to see, just to verify and validate that this login sequence is actually going to work. So when I click on the replay, so I'm not touching anything, it should just walk through the login sequence. And now if I close it, it tells me that yes, it's all validated and it's good to go. You can actually edit the steps here manually by editing some of the values or the specific steps. So if you want to do that, it does require you to know a little bit more on what how to specify some of the steps here. But everything can be actually edited and configured directly within the action-based playback menu. Okay, and then the other thing around session detection is around the ability to just tell AppScan that if it's while it's scanning, right, while it's exploring your site, AppScan may need to verify whether itself is in session or not. Because think about the scenario where AppScan is crawling through your site, it's testing different things, it's going through different URL, different pages. But if it was logged out, then how does it know, right? How does it know that at this time, am I logged out or not? So AppScan will regularly visit the URL that you specify in the in-session detection, which is this URL here. And also it will look for a particular pattern that you tell it to indicate that it is in session. So as you can see, the sign off would be a good indicator, right? Like if you're logged in, that means you usually can see sign off. Sometimes like hello username is also a good indicator as well. Okay, so you just need to be able to pick a good in-session detection pattern to tell AppScan that it is currently in session. Now, if you click on the advanced pattern selection on the right here, okay, and that should give you this pop-up. And on the left bottom, in the in-session response, let me just double click and make this bigger. You'll get to see the entire HTTP response within that URL that we selected. And you can actually manually pick like another element within this page as a in-session detection pattern. So, like right now, the sign off text is actually quite sufficient, but just for sake of demonstration, for example, I can actually, let's say, like if you see this saving account number, right? Usually I would make the argument that if you can see like an account number, that means you're logged in this case. So I can actually try and use, just paste that. And then, so I'm actually now picking a different pattern. Okay, so again, I'm just doing this for the sake of demonstration. You don't actually have to do this. The default sign off button was actually quite adequate already. And AppScan makes a good effort in validating and making sure the pattern that it picks is actually adequate and usable, right? Okay, so that's how you set the in-session detection pattern. You may want to validate it again just to make sure whatever changes you made is actually going to be replicable by AppScan. Okay, so that's what the validate button does. It's going to play back the sequence. It's going to test your in-session detection pattern, making sure everything's good. And looks like my new pattern is actually acceptable. Okay, so for your environment, you can just leave it at the log off button, but you're free to just pick something else and see what happens there too. Okay, so finally, we have test policy as well. So test policy basically tells AppScan what sets of tests we're going to send to the application. So there are different predefined policies, as you can see here. There's application only, which is more like application focused type of tests. There are things like infrastructure, which is a lot of it is on like the headers or the infrastructure level type of test and see if there's any vulnerabilities on that aspect. You can do complete, which is going to include a large majority of everything. Usually default is actually a good one. It's a good balance that our developers has included that detects some of the most common vulnerabilities that are identified in today's applications. But I want to show you also, if you want to see exactly what test is included in these policies, click on the full scan configuration on the bottom left here. Okay, again, it's on the bottom left box under the general task. There's a full scan configuration. Okay, so click on that. And this will bring this view where you can see exactly here, if I can just maximize this, exactly what tests are being sent to the application. So with the default test policy selected, and now if I were to expand some of these checkboxes, I'll get to see the exact test that we are sending to your application. And if you click on these tests, you get to see exactly what kind of payload is going to be sent, and then what is the exploit that we're testing here. There's some of these tests will also include a CVE ID if there's one available. So you can actually search by that, by a particular CVE ID using the search field at the top here. And you'll notice that as I click on different test policies, it's going to modify the checkboxes, right? Just to tell me, like what's going to be included and what's not going to be included. If you want to be very hands-on with this, you can actually select the test policies that you want, and you can actually export it. Okay, so you see how once I select some of these checkboxes, if you click on export, you can now save your test policy. So I'm going to call this, Anthony's test policy. Okay, and now I have a custom test policy. Now, if I click OK, just to kind of close this full scan configuration, I'm now back into the wizard, and you can see I have a new test policy included. Okay, so I'm not going to use that. I'll use the application only because it's usually it's a good balance, between the different things that you want to test. But yeah, I would say application only default are some really common ones that people use. Okay, but you can examine these ones and see which one would fit the best. Lastly, we have the ability to also modify the test optimization. So basically, this is just a slider that allows you to configure how quick you want the test phase of the scan to run. The faster you set, the coverage is going to decrease. But we have actually made optimization in what is trimmed off from a testing point of view. So you can see like in the bottom here, for example, if let's just pick the fast, which is the default one, you get to see that the test stage is like twice as fast, but then you only have about a 3% of reduction in the vulnerabilities compared to the non-optimized scan. So the 97% is really based on a statistical model that we have put forward where we are detecting 97% of the most common vulnerabilities, right? So despite the fact that we are able to trim down on some of the tests and also the number of variants that we test for a particular test, usually, right, it's all statistics here. We're still able to find 97% of the vulnerabilities compared to the non-optimized. You can always use the no optimization if you are in a pre-prod or like pre-release stage and you want to just it's going to take a longer time, but then it's going to be as comprehensive as possible and as exactly what you specify in your test policy. So it's suitable for major release, compliances. So yeah, that's what you would usually use that for. Okay, so now if I click next, it will now take me to the final what I want to do, right? So you can actually start the scan right away, and you can see that if you decide to choose that, and don't click on this yet, just want to explain a little bit what's going on here. You'll be able to explore and test the site all in its entirety. Now, some advanced users actually don't prefer that. Usually what some people would like to do, especially if you have used AppScan Standard a few times, is you may want to do explore only, automatic explore only. And then the reason why you want to use this is because you'll get to see what was explored, and you'll also get an opportunity to ensure that if there are certain parts of the site that it was not explored, you can actually do a manual explorer to enhance the coverage of your scan. Right, so if you do a full scan like the first option, it's gonna do an automatic explorer, which actually 90% of the time it does a good job at exploring your site. If it's especially if it's if there's not too much forms that require specific ways to fill out the forms, then the automatic explorer does quite a good job at exploring the site. But usually, if you do a automatic explorer, you won't go into the test phase right away. You'll get to see what was explored and then enhance it if you need to. Then you run a test later. You can also do just a dedicated manual explorer, where in this case it's not going to do automatic explore at all. You can, in this case, you would just need to teach AppScan where you want to explore. So this is very useful for specific feature testing within the application. So let's say the developer comes and say, hey, we added these couple pages in our application. I want you to test them. Instead of doing a full explore and test, you can actually just use manual explorer and test those pages, right? Those specific pages, and then let AppScan then test those pages afterwards. Lastly, you can also just do nothing, just start the scan later, and I don't want to start anything. Okay. So now let's use the last option because I want to show you a completed scan without running the full scan. These machines are going to be available for another day or so. So, after this session, you're free to come back here and try all these different options. But just for the sake of time for this workshop, I'm going to use the last one. And let's all click on this last one, and I'll show you where we can pull a completed scan. Okay, so once we click on that, so here, let's just, a good habit is to just save the scan template because, we haven't run the scan, but we have configured something, right? So you can actually always just go to File, Save Scan Template, and I'm just gonna call this, Anthony's template. And you can always then just refer back to this particular scan configuration in the future. Okay, so let's now go to File, Open, and in the File Open area, let's click on Browse. Okay, and then that should take us to this default directory called AppScan. Okay, so it should be under your username, document, AppScan. We want to open up the application only test. Okay, so let's just all select that and then click open. It's asking us if we want to save the last configuration that we did, which we just did, so we don't have to save it again. So I'm just going to click don't save. And then it should open up the completed scan. So while it's opening out, I want to answer some questions that I see here. So how to configure single sign-on logins. So if your application has single sign-on, recall how when we were recording the login sequence, right? It's when we say, I want to record login, it's going to take us to the starting URL, right? And from there, you simply have to follow through the process that you log in, which includes, if there was a redirect to your single sign-on page, all you have to do is just follow through your typical recorded login sequence, and it should recognize that single sign-on steps and where it needs to click, where it needs to put in the credentials, and it will once it reroutes back to your application, then you have a completed authentication configured, right? So single sign-on is generally not an issue. You can test it out and see if it's how that works. Okay. And then so when it comes to session timeout, so a question around how to overcome session timeouts. There's different ways that you would configure that. So that's more of a kind of an advanced topic where you need to configure the scan so that it can accommodate your application and its behavior, right? So sometimes, because AppScan will try to send as many requests as it can. It does cause some issues to some applications that may not be able to handle a certain workload. I will show you, so this is open here. I'll just quickly show you this. If you go to configuration on the left here, there are some settings here. So for example, if you go to communication and proxy, you can actually adjust the threads on how quick is AppScan going to try to send the request to your application. You might want to turn this down if it's not able to handle it. 1 is the minimum here. And then you can also adjust the timeout here, right? So if you want to increase the timeout, you can actually make those adjustments and basically tell AppScan, when it would consider a page, has timed out. Okay, I'm gonna cancel so I don't save this. And then I think OTP. So yeah, that's something I haven't really walked through. So again, let's go back to configuration. So by the way, notice how when you click on the configuration here, it's taking you to the full scan configuration, right? It's not the wizard. The wizard is just like think of it as just a trimmed down version of this full scan configuration. But you can see with this full scan configuration, you get a lot more menus and things you can tweak and adjust. Communication and proxy is one. But yeah, about OTP, if you click on the third option here, here's where you can configure your OTP setting. Okay, so if it's a TOTP, then you need to provide a secret key, your length, your hash algorithm, your time step. There's also a OTP HTTP parameter. So you don't have to fill this in the first time you run the Explorer. AppScan is going to try to automatically detect which parameter the OTP field would go under, and it will tell you that right here. And once you do the Explorer once, and you come back here and you see, okay, well, it didn't detect the parameter, you can then type it in here, right? So the recommended step is to just fill in the things you need to make sure your OTP is configured, and just observe what happens in this field and see if you need to make some adjustments. We have some so this little help explains what I just explained there. But within the documentation, we actually go through very detailed steps on what is to be expected in some of these things. URL generated OTP, again, is just a URL-based OTP, one-time password. So all you have to do is provide the URL, and then also how to extract the value out of the response, right? So again, this is something that you can look at our documentation if you need more help on how to configure this. Our support team also is there to provide you with assistance if you need some guidance around some of these configurations. But yeah, so this is where you can configure the OTP. Okay, all right, so let me go back to, and I'll come back to the questions again here, but yeah, great questions, guys. Let's go through this full scan result here. So basically what we have done here is we've opened up a full scan result / configuration. So as you can see here in the dashboard, this is telling us that this is actually a completed scan. Okay, so we have done the scan before already, and you can see when the scan was conducted first, how long the scan ran. So it ran for 39 minutes. The starting URL is here. If there were some errors that occurred during the scan, you can see that too. Okay. It also tells us things like the number of open issues, number of elements tested, the number of pages visited, and also I think very importantly the explore data. Okay, so what are the number of request parameter cookies captured during the scan? To explore these a little bit more in depth, you would need to click on the data is the first place I would go. So consider the data view as a place for you to verify if you have adequate coverage. So, as with any scanning tools that you use out there, right? Your scan can be only as good as your coverage. If you're not able to explore certain parts of your site, regardless of whether there's vulnerability there or not, there's no way for us to test it, right? So the data view is where you can examine things like the parameters that we saw, and you can see as I click through the different parameters, the request and response can be shown at the bottom. If you right click on any of these URLs, you can also show in browser. Okay. So notice how this is actually the same site that we had, Altoro Mutual, but this is actually deployed locally. You'll find a Tomcat server in these VMs, and that's why we can render these pages. Apart from request and then the parameters, right? So what parameters we have captured. Okay, so another kind of view or another pivot that allows you to see which parameters are identified and basically what we're going to be testing, right? Cookies, if there's cookies that are captured, and I think also one thing I do want to point out is the session ID in this case, and notice how it says it's tracked. Basically, what this means is that the session ID that was generated as part of the login sequence is going to be tracked and used for your subsequent pages, right? So, again, another way to validate whether my login sequence is good. I mean, you can obviously see from the sitemap here whether your login is good, right? Some of these pages, you can make the determination that if I'm not logged in, I might not be able to get access. Maybe I don't know, like the bank transfer page, for example, right? So just another way to just examine if your login is adequate, and we're able to explore the authenticated pages. Okay, headers, if there's headers that are detected, it will be listed here. The pages as well, I think this is another important page to just browse through and identify if the coverage is adequate. Field request is another interesting one, because field requests sometimes can tell us a lot of things. It can tell us whether a set of pages may not be explorable because of a landing page being broken, right? So if there are some failed requests or failed pages, you kind of want to know, right? You want to know like maybe certain page, like maybe my bank landing page is not working, which means that my transfer, functions are not going to be tested. So you want to see if there's like any failed, pages or request response with 404 error, anything like that, right? You want to pay attention to that. Filtered is something you can take a quick look at. It just basically tells you during the explore sequence, some things are going to be omitted as part of the test later on, simply because of optimization that AppScan has done. So, you can see things like similar DOM, right? If it's just imagine you have a shopping cart or like a catalog page of a e-commerce site with a lot of similar pages across different product lines, but they're all using the same DOM structure. It's going to skip, AppScan is going to detect that, and it's going to skip the similar ones. Okay, so that's what that means here. You may want to, like if you don't agree with some of these, you may want to make some changes to change the behavior. But usually, in my experience, it does quite an accurate job at detecting what is redundant and what can be skipped. All in the name of optimizing, making the scan faster, right? File extension, things that just is not relevant for a DAST scan, like you see JPEGs here, so these are all going to be skipped. Comments as well. It's going to pull out some comments. So if the developer left a password, like a password in the comment field, you can actually see that as well. Also, all the scripts that are embedded in the application, you'll get to see what those JavaScript are. Okay, so that's the data view. Again, the importance here is for coverage verification, right? If it's inadequate coverage, we may want to enhance it with some manual explorer or make some tweaks to our scan settings to improve the automatic explorer. Let's now click on the issues. Okay, so here's where we see all the vulnerabilities that have been identified by AppScan. So you can see as I click on the issues view, it's going to populate all the findings, right? So sorted by severity, status, whether it is open or if it's if someone has set it to noise. So all those settings can be or those attributes can be viewed in this screen here. Now, as you click through different issues, the right panel or the issue detail is gonna change. So this is just so that you can examine or verify whether these are good findings, and then you want them to you want them to be considered as a potential candidate for fix, right? Every issue as it's found initially is going to have an open status. Now, if for some reason you determine that this is just not applicable to us, or it's not it's not it's a noise in our situation, it's a false positive, you can set it to noise here. And what that means is that AppScan, if you were to rerun this scan again using AppScan Standard, it's going to recognize that if it sees this again, it's going to recognize that it's a noise, right, or a false positive. So let's click on the third one here, reflected cross-site scripting. And when you click on that, on the right, make sure you're under the issue information tab. This is basically a place where it explains, what it found, right? First of all, what it changed to make the test, right? So you can see it made some changes to the content parameter, so yeah, you can see that there's a script that it injected right into your application. It also made a change to the lang parameter as well by adding a script element in there. And then basically what AppScan is showing is that your application is susceptible to cross-site scripting, because when we inject a script with an alert pop-up box, your application actually is able to render that. So no sanitization was detected within that parameter. And this is what contributes to a potential cross-site scripting issue. And to further validate this, right, you can click on the request and response. Okay, so the second tab here on the top right, where this is actually going to give you more detail from a request and response point of view on what is kind of examined, what is found here, right? So you can further see like the content parameter has that script that we just talked about, injected in the request header, or in the request field here, sorry. And then if we scroll down, what I'm looking for is a yellow highlight. Maybe not yellow, but red highlight in this case. So here, if you scroll down and we look at the response part of the HTTP document here, you can see the alert, well, actually the script content being injected here without sanitization, right? So that's why this is a cross-site scripting. It's reflected back, and the alert box can be visible from this view here. Now, I don't know if this is going to work, but you can also try show in browser. What it's going to do is it's going to send the exact request with the payload. Okay, so here on this little box here, next to this request and response, if you see a little box with the arrow, show in browser. Yeah, so you can see it performed the attack again, right? And then you see the the alert box showing in your application, as it's being attacked live. Okay, so some things can be checked using show in browser, some may not. All these reflected ones can be shown that way, but some other ones is not a reflection based, or if it does not render in the browser, it may not make sense. So it depends on what kind of issue you are testing. Lastly, there's also a how to fix. So it looks like there's a bit of an issue with my license here. But yeah, I just want to outline that for the how to fix,